Me.
Tell me where you been lately. Why you acting rowdy crazy?
Yo, what you mean?
Ready to go, ready to blow off the walls. Don't
I'm standing at the peak of my passion. April baby shower, send lightning a flashing. Overflow of diamond tidal waves are crashing. Flooding all the issues I've had in my past, and I'm surfing straight past them. I'm filling with action. All my haters swarming with the fatal attraction. Common curiosity, the question they're asking.
tell me where you been.
I just look at them laughing, I keep moving on past them. I'm no longer a has-been, now I'm a Shelby. Gone in 60 seconds, unicorn the Shelby. Coming over obstacles, working with shall we, and yes we shall see Lee prevail.
Tell me where you been lately. Why you acting rowdy crazy?
What do you mean?
Ready to go, ready to blow.
Welcome to Lee TV's Impact on Life. I'm your host, Jarmaine Lee, and it's a blessing for me to start yet another season here on Hartford Public Access Television. I'm grateful for all of you that have stayed faithful in viewing the show, giving me encouraging words as I see you out in the community and out on the streets. Continue to pray for me and my family as we grow in stature and grow in the Lord. And I continue to pray for each and every one of you. I'm thankful for Sister Trish, my engineer, and all those that work for the station. I just want to let you know that I truly do appreciate each and every one of you with all my heart. I pray that God will increase your territory, increase your wisdom, increase your knowledge, and your understanding of where you fit in this life. Now, this next season is going to be a season of teaching. I feel it necessary because in looking in our community, there are several issues that have yet to be addressed. And the best way to address them is through the spirituality of the Word of God. If we can get a foundation within God's Word, within our life, it will help us to transform our lifestyle and transcend all those things that have continued to hold us back. It's time to trim the fat and shake off all those excess clothes and lighten our load a little bit. It's time for the season to change. And in that thought, with this being Independence Day coming up, we're going to study along a line of freedom that isn't really talking about freedom itself, but it's talking about the freedom we have to embrace the changing seasons within our lives. I'm coming from the book of the preacher, the Old Testament book of Ecclesiastes, the 3rd chapter, starting at the 1st verse. There is a time for everything, a season for every activity under the sun, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to harvest, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to tear down and a time to rebuild. Now, before we go any further, I want to address this time factor. When we look into the life of an individual, we see several different stages that occur beyond our control. From infancy, we have to be cared for and nurtured and fed and changed, and we can't even use the bathroom by ourselves. We have to be coached and cared for one step at a time. But that season only lasts but so long. Now, some babies get potty trained a little bit earlier than others. Some start holding bottles and grabbing forks and spoons a little quicker, and some start doing it a little bit later. But each and every individual has their own growth season. And when we look in our lives, it's important that we identify those seasons. You don't continue to put diapers on a grown man unless he has a medical issue that he can't go to the restroom for himself. However, that situation is completely different than his baby and infant stages. We have to identify this for the purpose of growth and development. Many of us stay stagnant in the same position because we fail to embrace the seasons that come into our lives. We hang around certain people far beyond the season that they're supposed to be in our lives, and while they're supposed to be in our lives, and while that season has come when we first meet them and we first embrace our friendship, or we first embrace our mentorship, or we first embrace why this person has come into our lives, we bond with them so strong that when the time comes for us to leave them and move on to the next level, we choose to hold on longer than what God has planned for us to hold on to. It might not be your fault. Maybe in your heart of hearts, you feel that you're ready to move on. You need that change. You need that transition. But this person won't let you go. And you, having the compassion that you have for this individual, the love that you've developed and grown for this individual, you don't want to hurt their feelings. So instead of changing with the season that you feel has come in your heart, you continue to stay in the wrong season. That's not healthy. That's not beneficial. It's actually counterproductive to the overall goal that God has intended for our lives. Look at the word. It says there is a time for everything, a season for every activity under the sun. Every individual has certain gifts and certain capabilities. But in order for us to perfect those gifts and to grow in those gifts, we have to have a season of practice and preparation. But before we can practice something, we have to learn it. So you have to have a season of teaching and submission to a teacher. You have to be fed the word so that you can grow in the word, so that you can begin to understand the word. But you can't know something that you've never been taught. Many people feel like they're so spiritual and they're so godly, but haven't heard the word of God for a specific reason, because they haven't encountered a preacher. Now, I'm not talking about the pulpiteer that sits behind this desk on Sundays. Those are preachers. But a preacher is one who proclaims the word of God. And in that, he is giving you a soil turning, seed planting, crop watering experience. You can't grow something that hasn't been planted first. And in the planting stages, the ground has to be prepared. So when we look at this season for every activity under the sun, it has to begin somewhere. And after the beginning, there has to be a season of practice and rehearsal, preparation, and doing it over and over and over again, because eventually it's going to become your opportunity to exercise what it is that you know. Oftentimes, our teachers don't go with us outside of the teaching arena. Think about it in the realm of school. We send our kids to kindergarten. They learn their colors, they learn their shapes, they learn their alphabets, they learn how to trace the letters and write. But after they finish that, they have to go to the next grade where they can learn how to put those letters into sequences of words. Then they start having spelling tests. Then they start having math tests. It might just be 1 + 1, 1 + 2. But at some point in time, you have to learn how to put those things together. But if this child continued to grow and stayed in school all day, he would never have an opportunity to come outside of that learning environment and see how to apply it in the other areas of his life. Many of us are stuck in the same season because we don't want to stop our growth. We don't want to stop our being taught. And it's good to stay forever a student, but at some point in time, the student has to become a teacher. At some point in time, the student has to become one who exercises the things that they learn. There's a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to harvest. Now, this next verse is very pertinent to a lot of the things that go on today. I've done a lot of street ministry not just here in Hartford, but across this country, starting in Illinois, going out to Washington State, Atlanta, Georgia, and all over the city of Hartford. And in doing this, I met several people who have had this reality check when they've lost loved ones. Reality check when they end up pregnant and didn't expect to. However, when I look into life, I understand that we are accountable for the things that we do. We see people that put themselves in harm's way, live a dangerous lifestyle. So the potential for death is much greater on those individuals than one who's just walking an everyday lifestyle of peace, patience, and persistence along the course that they're on. So we see these people who live these hazardous lifestyles, and then one of them lose their life, and everyone around them wants to blame God because this person died. There's a proverb that says, if you live by the sword, you shall die by the same sword. Many of us live violent lives and wonder why violence comes and knocks on our door. But just like the second portion of that verse says, there's a time to plant and a time to harvest. This isn't just talking about the physical greenery of the world, but this talks about the things that you put into your universe, the things that you speak into your life, the things that you build your person up to so that you can expect a return from them. And if you put all this evil and negativity into the world, and when it grows and has fully developed, and you find that the harvest you planted is not the harvest you wanted, then you have a hard reality to accept. But if you accept the truth and start to understand that everything has its time, all of us have our cycle, and when that cycle has come to a close, something has to change. There has to be some type of transition. It makes it easier to understand why death is necessary, why birth is necessary, why seed time is necessary, why you have to cultivate the ground, and why there is a season of harvest. See, we look at seed planting, and take a garden for instance. When we plant these seeds and they develop and they grow, when they start to sprout and you start to see the buds and then you start to see the fruit of your labor, what we don't understand is that we're killing that plant when we take the fruit off of its tree. That harvest time means that it's time to come in so that you can be eaten. Why? Because that plant has been growing and has been gathering nutrients so that it can feed the next level of something else's life. Now that something else might be a person. That something else might be an animal. That something else might be a family. It might be a community. It may even be an environment. But something has to happen. There has to be some type of transition in, how did the Lion King put it, in the circle of life. Everything has its responsibility. And once that responsibility has been fulfilled, it has to go to the next level. A time to kill and a time to heal. A time to tear down and a time to rebuild. Many of us have been facing the time to kill too much. We've taken out of context God's intention for war and for hunting and for gathering, and we've become murderers. We not only murder people in their physical body, but we murder them in their mental mind, in their spiritual body. We murder the identity of an individual. We murder the motivation and the inspiration within an individual. That time to kill has been overwhelmed, and there's no healing going on. Now, what has this caused? This has caused a cancer that has plagued us within our communities. It has caused devastation to come into our communities. It has caused vacant lots to be grown up and littering to overwhelm and consume. It has caused the mentality of great individuals with potential to transcend the negativity of their environment. It's caused them to suppress the passion within their heart and to become stuck in a rut of death and damnation. There's no healing going on. And when a season goes too long, it causes the negative effect to occur. Imagine if we lived in a world that was full of nothing other than winter. Imagine if the spring never came to wash the snow away and to water the life that once was and bring the green back so that we can have the melanin and the chlorophyll and the life back into our environments. Imagine if the spring consistently chose to rain every day and the summer heat never came to give us that tan that we need, to give us that energy and that vitamin B and C and all those nutrients that we get from the closeness of the sun, and to bring that warmth to overshadow the cold of the wintertime. Imagine if the fall stayed with us year round and the trees never had leaves. Everything continued to die and prepare for the utter and bitter chill. Life would be off balance. And you say, well, preacher, what about the desert? Even in the desert and the 100 to 110 degree days that they still have 50 and 60 degree nights. They still have a seasonal change and transition. If it didn't, life would not be able to exist. What if we only had day and there was no night? We wouldn't know when to rest. We wouldn't know how to rest. We would be so off balance and so thrown off. And when we look into our communities, the reason that we're experiencing the things that we're experiencing right now is because our seasons have gone off balance. There has been the time to kill, but there has not been the time to heal. We've been tearing down everything around us. We've been tearing down our motivation. We've been tearing down our mentality. We've been tearing down the fact that we are kings, queens, princes, and princesses. We've been tearing down the fact that we are a peculiar people, a royal priesthood. We've been tearing down and breaking down and killing everything that God has intended for our good. And it has blinded our eyes from the truth. It's time for that season to pass and for us to step into the opposite side and heal our land and rebuild our communities. I read a text message on Facebook today that said the children of the 60s, 70s, and 80s were the last generation to actually not have flat screen TVs, to actually record music on a tape deck off the radio, to play Nintendo and Atari, to ride in cars that didn't have seat belts like that, to live in households that we can go throughout a whole community without our parents worrying about us. We were the last generation to actually go outside and have fun for hours without playing the same silly games. We actually went out and played in the woods and got lost in the wilderness and stayed gone for hours, and we came back into the house and sat down as a family. We actually build each other in our communities, and we can get in trouble by every member of our community. If they saw us doing wrong, we got reprimanded, not only by them, but also by our parents. We lived in a community that cared. But that stopped with the generation that was born in the 80s. Why? Because in the 90s, they started carrying guns instead of having fights. They started getting text messages and cell phones and being readily accessible at all times instead of actually going home and waiting for a person to come home and have their home and family time. They lost the gardening experience because they didn't grow their own fruit. They went to the reproduce mass production help me, Holy Ghost, steroid injected surplus of the grocery stores. We came out the garden and went into the produce aisle, and we lost touch with the season of being a community of families. And we've entered a realm of individuals. It's time for that season to change. It's time for our young people to see a community that cares. It's time for our young people to see how to respect the elder just because they're older than you. How children should stay out of grown folk business. How when adults are talking, that's no place for a child to be coming in, getting into conversations. How there is a respect factor that should go mutually across the board. How parents should be parents. Instead of trying to go out and drink and smoke and kick it with your kids, have a respect from your children and for your children. There's a time and a season for everything. A time to cry and a time to laugh. A time to grieve and a time to dance. A time to scatter stones and a time to gather stones. A time to embrace and a time to turn away. Many of us have embraced one too many things. Many of us have scattered those who love us and gathered those who hate us. I just dealt with a young man the other day whose friends had kicked him out of their community, had told them that if he don't handle his own business and get away from them, he can't come back around them. And I told him, brother, I didn't grow up in a community like that. I stopped hanging with the guys running in the streets to get into the church to preach. And I still have never been excommunicated from my brotherhood. We are still brothers today. I just took my wife back and she met individuals who's known me since 1985, 1983, 1980 when I was a baby fresh out. And the camaraderie and the love that we have is still just as strong now as it is then. Why? Because they identified the fact that I had gone through my knucklehead stage and I was coming out of that knucklehead stage and stepping into the man of God stage who I was always ordained and destined to be. But that didn't stop the love and the brotherhood and the camaraderie that we had built playing baseball in the tennis court, playing slaughter the bomb in the field, playing basketball on the basketball court, running around in the community playing tag and catch a girl, kiss a girl, and all the games we played as a child. When I was a child, I thought as a child. I spoke as a child. I did childish things. But as I became a man, I had to put those things to the side. Each one of us went on different life journeys, went on different courses. We developed in different careers. But we still respected and loved each other for who we were and who we had been. We understood that our time to embrace had come to a time to separate. And now that we have turned away and went our separate ways, the love that we had for each other was still there. It was just time for us to expand our livelihood and expand our repertoire. God was moving us into a new season. But many of our children get stuck in this lifeless world. And they lose any motivation of going to graduate at the top of their class. They lose any motivation of going to graduate at the top of their college. They lose any motivation to go past being a bachelor into a master. They lose any motivation into getting not only a workman's accreditation, but a journeyman's accreditation, and then becoming a master of your trade. They lose any motivation and possibility of anything positive in their lives because they have become stuck in the same season and there is no change. Because they don't see change. And it's our responsibility as adults and as elders and as the seniors within our community to embrace the season change that has come in our life. I respect my parents because when I was a baby, they treated me as a baby. When I became an adolescent, they treated me as an adolescent. And my punishments were increased because my responsibility was greater. And when I didn't fulfill my responsibility, I would receive the punishment. But when I did fulfill the responsibility, I received the reward. And as I grew up, they let me know that it was time to get out their house so that I can fly. Sometimes we have to take examples from the birds in the nest. They feed their kids. They chew their food up at first and put it in their mouth so they can eat. But after a while, they get big enough and they get strong enough. And then it gets to a point where that mother will grab them and drop them out the nest and say, it's time to fly. You've built your strength up. I can't allow you to stay here forever. But we live in a society where many of us are stuck. We need to realize that there is a time to tear and a time to mend, a time to be quiet and a time to speak up, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. Well, preacher, you're saying all these things, but that's what's going on in the hood right now. The things that we need to be tearing, we're mending. And the things that we need to be mending, we're tearing apart. There are those who love us, and if they love us, they correct us, they chasten us, they chastise us. And instead of embracing that chastisement, we tear our bond with them to mend a relationship with an unhealthy, unproductive individual. That's the bond that needs to be torn, and we need to submit under the teaching of one who is actually trying to correct us. Why? Because correction prevents you from falling. But when we see a lifestyle that's constantly putting us in jail, constantly putting us in harm's way, constantly putting us in danger, and we're not benefiting at all from that, something is detrimentally wrong. When we listen to the negativity of others, mess starters, people that just want to go around gossiping, talking about somebody else's business and always disrespecting folk and calling everybody out of their name and don't have nothing good to say. When we get caught up in those conversations, we always love to speak up, but that's actually a time to be quiet. But when we have drug dealers and thugs keeping our kids from being able to play in the community, that's when we go quiet. That's when we don't want to say nothing. That's when we choose to stay inside of our house instead of coming out, letting our voice be made known. When we have politicians that are sitting up here taking all of the resources and putting it in every place around us, but they're not bringing it into our own environments and our own communities. That's the time to speak up. That's the time to let our voice be heard. But instead, we say, no, I'm just not going to vote. No, I'm just not going to go to the poll. No, I'm going to be silent. When in actuality, it needs to be the other way around. If you don't speak about your own concern, why are they going to listen? But you got the nerve to turn around and start complaining when they're not doing nothing for you. And you have the opportunity to vote people in who are going to bring change, who are going to bring motivation, who are going to bring inspiration, and who are going to bring jobs, change, benefits. But we don't want to stand up and support those individuals. We don't want to stand up and back those organizations. You know what we do? We speak up when we see people out in the street preaching to a dying community and say, well, that ain't gonna do nothing. You ain't gonna do nothing. But guess what it would do if you would actually stop your lip flapping and come on this side and stand with that man? Guess what it would do if you would stop talking about, oh, she always trying to cook. Stop complaining about her cooking, giving food away, and come over here and help her cook and be a benefit to somebody that don't have. Be a benefit to somebody that can't cook. We need to build our community. It is time for our seasons to change. The things that we should love, we hate. And the things that we should hate, we love. We love for somebody to call us out our name. We love for some Negro to be beating us upside our head. We love to be cheated on. We love to be living in a homosexual lifestyle that cannot reproduce and bring life, but we want to complain about the opposite sex instead of going to embrace and build and try to find out what the problem is that has us divided. We're supposed to hate the sin and love the God. And if we can look for the God within each other, then we can find God within each other. But if we're not looking for that, if we're constantly loving the evil thing, that means that we hate what is good. And that is causing us to be in a season of damnation. See, I haven't opened the call lines because I don't know if y'all are saying amen. I don't know if y'all are in agreement. Some of y'all might not like what I'm saying, but at this point in time, in this stage in my life, it's a lot of people that's not going to like the things that I've done. Not because it's me, but because the God in me is saying, Lee, it's time for a change. It's time for a drastic transition. It's time for you to do my will. And in doing that, it's going to upset some people who have become comfortable with the things that I've been doing for them. Even though I've been faithful in those things, our season has come to a close. I mentioned one day to one of my mentors about this very scripture. And I don't think that he completely grasped what it was that I was saying. But I've said that we've reached the end of our road. That doesn't mean that I love you less. That doesn't mean that I don't support what it is that you're doing. What that means is that my involvement in what you have been called to do has come to its conclusion. If you hate me for that, take that up with God. Because what he is doing is placing in my mind a focused mentality. Just like horses walk with those two black things on the side of their eyes so they don't get distracted, I have to fine-tune my focus and let God's will be in the forefront of my life. I have to stand there and say, Lord, I'm putting your word in front of my eyes, and I'm removing whoever has been in my way, whatever has been on my path, and however I've been doing it. And I'm saying, not my will, but thy will be done. Look in the life of Jesus Christ. Don't you think that he loved the people that he had been around and teaching and preaching and healing and doing these things for? Don't you think that he loved his disciples? He didn't want to leave them. But when he went to the garden, he knew, maybe I could ask my Father for a little bit more time. Maybe I can tell him to take this cup away from me so I just don't have to go through it. But if he say that I still have to endure it, the end of my prayer is going to say, Father, not my will, but thy will be done. Many things that we go through are going to put us in an uncomfortable position. Change is never comfortable. Change always forces us out of our comfort zone. But when that change has completed itself, we can see a glory that has yet to come to our eyes. See, you can't compare one winter to another, because 2 winters ago, we had 6 feet of snow in the first month and a half of the season. But last winter, we barely had 3 feet of snow in the whole entire winter. Why? Because that was a different season. It was a different change. I remember one summer that June brought snow. But this June brought 90-degree days, 80-degree days, and a whole lot of rain. As seasons go on and seasons persist, seasons change. Nothing stays the same, even though there's nothing new under the sun. Well, what do you mean, preacher? See, as our life develops and maturity comes, or we embrace growth, we start to see that I can't go back to what I used to be. That's just like a dog going back to his own vomit. I have to keep looking forward. I have to keep moving forward. I might go over some of the same hurdles, but I can't keep going over those hurdles the same way. I have to learn a new way so that it can become easier on me, so that I can use the wisdom that I've gathered over my years to make my load a little bit lighter, so that I can teach someone how to overcome this hurdle before they have to fall on their face. But if I keep coming up to the same hurdle, and every time I hit this hurdle, I fall on my face, I've shown that I haven't learned a thing, and my season has not changed. Verse 9 says, what do people really get for all their hard work? I've thought about this in connection with the various kinds of work God has given people to do. God has made everything beautiful for its own time. He has planted eternity in the human heart. But even so, people cannot see the whole scope of God's work from beginning to end. Have you ever seen a young lady, cute as could be, got her own little personality, might have a few tomboyish ways, but when she put on that dress, just bat her eyes and make you fall all head over heels, just like my little niece Taylor. Happy birthday, baby. Happy birthday to my wife, and happy birthday to my son. And this Friday, happy birthday to my grandma. It's a whole lot of birthdays this week. But thanks be to God, back on the focus. Have you seen that little girl transition from a little girl to a young lady? Beautiful, vibrant, carrying herself mature. But have you seen that young lady transition into a woman? Mature, intelligent. Then have you seen that young woman transition into a mother? Each one of these stages has a different change. See, the little girl didn't have a developed body. She just had a cute look and nice mannerisms. But the young lady started to develop her features and started to develop her figure. But the young woman has reached her size, and she's reached her style, and she's developed how she likes to dress and how she likes her nails to be done and how she likes her hair to be done. But the mother has now gathered a new responsibility. She's brought life into this world, so her outlook changes. Her physical body changes to adapt to the life that she just brought in. After she raises that baby for a while or has a couple more kids and maturity starts to fall on her, you see that young woman and that mother transition into a mama or a grandmother. And that beauty that she once had has a completely different vibrance. It has a completely different glow. It has a completely different elegance. And as she grows and matures into grandma and then big mom, you see the grace of her years, the wisdom of her years. And you can see her look back over her life and see these young women that have grown up in her tutelage and grown up in her genealogy, and she can teach them different things that she's learned along the course of her journey. And then you see the young women say, "Grandma, you don't know nothing about." "What you mean? You ain't never had to deal with this and that." And then she pulls out the photo album and she starts to show them pictures and say, "Girl, when I was your age." And she starts to reminisce and let the wisdom of her age and the beauty of her years and the elegance of her maturity shine on this young woman. And it's that light that can grab this young woman who she's teaching and direct her down a path so that she doesn't have to make the same mistakes, so that she doesn't have to fall into the same holes, so that her brilliance and beauty and graceful looks will far supersede the grandmother that she's talking to, so that when she becomes a grandmother, she can look back on her life and grab another young lady and say, "Here's another road that you can take. Just like I was taught to, you're going to be taught to, so that you can teach someone else as you grow older." And as we look in this, everything has its own beautiful season. But as that beauty transitions, it has to give back. It has to reach back. And we have to realize that we don't clearly know what the next stage in our life is going to bring. But when we get there, there is a different responsibility that we have to help guide someone else that is coming along that path. See, that young lady and that little girl didn't know what it was going to be like when they became that young woman and that mother. And that mother didn't know what it was going to be like when she became that grandma and that big mom. But once she became that big mother, she could look back over her life and see the things that God has and has not done for her. She can understand that God shouldn't have done some things for her. And thank you, Holy Ghost, that you didn't. Because if you had have done it, I probably would have lost my mind and I wouldn't have made it this far. Everything that's good to you ain't always good for you. And at 32 years old, there's some things that I can't see right now. But God is doing some things in my life, and he's changing some things in my world, so that as I go into 33, 42, 56, 82, it's going to be a completely different level that I have yet to live. But guess what? It is already on the inside of my heart. Why do I say that? Because he has planted eternity in the human heart. But even so, people cannot see the whole scope of God's work from beginning to end. It is our responsibility to embrace the change in our seasons. Sometimes you have to let things go. Sometimes you have to let people go. Sometimes you have to let organizations go. Sometimes you have to let lusts and desires go. Sometimes you have to grab a hold to something that you're not quite sure about, but you know this is where you're supposed to be because all signs point to it. I traveled for years on a Greyhound bus. Then I reached a stage where that Greyhound wasn't cutting it no more. And I transitioned to a train, transitioned to a plane, transitioned to driving. Eyes have not seen, ears have not heard, neither has it entered into the mind of man what God has prepared for his people. So I concluded that there is nothing better for people than to be happy and to enjoy themselves as long as they can. And people should eat and drink and enjoy the fruits of their labor, for these are the gifts from God. And you say, eat and drink and enjoy the fruits of my labor. Well, I hustle hard, so I'm going to go make it rain. See, that's not laboring. That's actually foolishness. Laboring is actually doing something productive to bring life, to provide for a household. Laboring doesn't make you have to look over your shoulder and be worried about the next day. It doesn't have you worrying about who you can and cannot trust. Laboring is not in vain. Eating and drinking the fruits of your labor means that when God has given you a job to do and it brings a benefit into your life, you live off that benefit. You share that benefit with those that come around you. You share that benefit with those within your household so that they can utilize your example and they can see what it means to truly be happy, because it is God's will, God's gift, and God's mission that truly gives our heart the satisfaction that we should have. And I know that whatever God does is final. Nothing can be added to it or taken from it. God's purpose in this is that people should fear him. Whatever exists today and whatever will exist in the future has already existed in the past. For God calls each event back in its turn. Foolishness will tell you they ain't never had no rams like this, but I have to tell you to look back on the old Egyptian and the old Mayan and the old civilizations of the past and check out the chariots that they lived. They had bigger wheels than you, and many of those were made out of chrome and gold and priceless. You can't have gold rims in today's society, but they had gold rims and chariots trimmed in gold and marble throughout the halls. And we look at these big edifices and these big buildings and these big beautiful churches that we have, but to my knowledge, nothing can compare to the temple that Solomon built. There's not a building or a palace or a kingdom that can compare to some of the glory of those structures that have been timeless, such as the pyramids. Strategically placed places like Stonehenge, places that have shown that they are timeless. They've endured weather, they've endured this, they've endured that, they've endured wars, they've endured rumors, they've endured great times, and they've endured bad times. We look in today's society and think that technology is new, but they did the same things we're doing back in the day. There's nothing new under the sun. I hope I didn't come too direct. I'm going to stop this right there with this last sentence that I read. Whatever exists today and whatever will exist in the future has already existed in the past. For God calls each event back in its turn. To America, I say, great kingdoms have fallen because they've lost their focus. The people have become wicked and perverse generation. They've taken their focus off the master and put their focus on things. And every time that happens, God comes in and wipes out a society. Will we be wiped out? Or will we humble ourselves before the Lord and hearken unto his call and transition in our season of change? This is Lee TV's Impact on Life. I am your host, Jarmaine Lee, saying God bless you. Good night. Stay blessed. We'll see you next week. Chi-Town, CT, worldwide.
Exclusive. Diamond Dove, loose lip.
Diamond Dove exclusive.
Tell me where you been lately. Why you acting rowdy, crazy?
So what do you mean?
Ready to go, ready to blow off the walls. Don't
Well, that's
you
just
know?
me.
Tell me where you been lately. Why you acting rowdy, crazy?
So what do you mean?
Ready to go, ready to blow off the walls. Don't
I'm
you
standing
know?
at the peak of my passion. April baby shower, send lightning a flashing. Overflow of diamond tidal waves are crashing. Flooding all the issues I've had in my past, and I'm surfing straight past them. I'm filling with action. All my haters swarming with the fatal attraction. Common curiosity, the question they're asking.
Tell me where you been.
I just look at them laughing, I keep moving on past them. I'm no longer a has-been, now I'm a Shelby. Gone in 60 seconds, unicorn the Shelby. Coming over obstacles, working with shall we, and yes we shall see Lee prevail.
Tell me where you been lately. Why you acting rowdy, crazy?
What do you mean?
Ready to go, ready to blow off the walls. Don't
that's
you
just
know?
me.
Tell me where you been lately. Why you acting rowdy, crazy?
What do you mean?
Ready to go, ready to blow off the walls. Don't you know?
Two scoops, some new shoes, and a pinstripe suit. Reminisce on mama playing the band high flute. Get fresh and best.